Well, we are back with chapter 15 of Outlier by Lisa Beeson. And let's get to it. Ari jerked awake so violently that she fell off the bed, blindly fighting a tangle of sheets and blankets. She had just had the nightmare of the pitch-black room again, and she had to take a second to realize where she was and that she was safe. To chase away the icy claws of the darkness, she quickly untangled herself from the blankets and got up to look out her window at the beautiful golden sun rising just above the silver-tinged ocean horizon, and the light blue sky streaked with warm, buttery clouds. Then she focused in on a pod of dolphins gleefully jumping in and out of the water in the distance. Deciding to go up to the sun deck to get some fresh air and a better look, she silently made her way through the ship. Still dressed in her baggy pajama pants and old blue Adidas t-shirt, which unfortunately hadn't grown with her, and was a little tighter now than it had been when Ruby had bought it for her back in Georgia. She crossed the master's deck as quietly as she could, so she wouldn't disturb Kale. When she finally reached the top level, she let out a breath of air that she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Then she stopped short at the sight of Tober, sitting cross-legged and facing the sunrise. He had his eyes closed and was taking slow, deep breaths with his hands lightly resting on his knees. "Oh, sorry," Ari whispered apologetically, not wanting to interrupt him. She was about to turn right back around when Tober held up one of his hands. "Stay," he said quietly, making her freeze in place. This is the first time he had ever talked to her directly. Then he slowly opened his eyes and looked over at her. "Have you ever tried meditating?" Ari just stood there, struck dumb for a second. That was the longest string of words she had ever heard him say. He had a deep, calming voice, tinged with a London accent. No, I haven't. I don't think I would even know how," she said lamely. "It's simple. Come." He patted the space next to him. Curious, she went over and sat down, crossing her legs like he was. "First, you must sit up straight." He placed his hand lightly on her lower back, causing her to sit up straighter. "Good. But relax. You shouldn't feel any tension. Just lightly rest each vertebrae on top of the other, supporting your torso, neck, and head." She did as he instructed, trying to find a balance between good posture and relaxation. "Now, gently rest your hands in your lap or on your knees, whichever is more comfortable." When she put her hands on her knees, he continued on. "Now close your eyes. Breathing normally, become aware of the rise and fall of your abdomen as you breathe in and out, like the undulation of the waves. Don't think about your breathing. Just be aware of it and clear your mind. Find the stillness within." This was a lot like how she connected to the ethos, deep breathing and clearing her mind. Maybe this was what Absalom had meant when he said I needed to be still and focus. Maybe meditation is the key. As she sat there calmly breathing in and out, clearing her mind and feeling the salty ocean breeze against her skin, she began to disconnect from the constant whirring of her thoughts and began to feel herself fall in tune with the frequencies of the energies around her. This probably wasn't what usually happened when people meditated, but for Ari it was absolutely freeing. Her consciousness radiated out and away from herself, and she was aware of everything around her. She felt Tober calmly sitting beside her, trying to find his own inner peace. Then further out to Kale, who was actually sleeping. And surprisingly, so was Serena, who was right beside him. Not wanting to linger on that, Ari pushed out further, and she felt Cam, Reed, and the Talisman crew. Then she pushed out even further. She felt the energies of the fish and sea life swimming and floating underneath and around their boat. As her field of awareness grew, she noticed a faint pulling sensation coming from the ocean floor. She recognized that pole. It's a stone. It's down there. She tried latching onto it like she did when she was tracking someone, and to her surprise, it worked. She could feel the pull even stronger, guiding her to its hiding place under the silt below. She let go, feeling confident that she could find it again. Then she let the happiness she felt flow through her and out to the energies around her, wanting to share the positivity. It was like she had become a conduit. All the energies were feeding into and flowing through her, like some kind of cosmic cycle. All the frequencies came together, making their own beautiful music that only Ari could feel and hear. It was renewing and strengthening her, and the stronger she became, the more acutely aware she became of Tober's energy. His soul was hurting. He was striving for a peace that would never come, and she felt an irresistible need to help him. Pulling her awareness away from the other energies, she focused everything on him, becoming a sort of energy dialysis machine, filtering out the toxins in his soul and replacing it with all the peace and solace she could give him. She lost all track of time while she was doing this, but was brought back down to herself when she heard Tober let out a deep, contented sigh, thick with emotion. She opened her eyes to see him looking at her with a serene smile on his face, and his eyes shiny with unshed tears. "I don't know how you did that, but thank you," he said sincerely. The overwhelming sense of peace she had just felt quickly dissipated when she started to realize what she had just done. What did I just do? His energy was bright and strong, but it wasn't exactly like she had emotionally amped him, more like she had strengthened his soul, making him almost as bright as a progeny. She couldn't quite figure it out. All she knew was that she had helped Tober, and it felt great. Not knowing how to respond to him, she just looked back with understanding in her eyes and nodded her head. "When Cam found out that I knew what Kale was, he told me all about you," Tober said quietly. "He talks a lot." Ari chuckled. "Yeah, I guess he does. That boy puts you on a very high pedestal, and now I know why." Ari looked down at her hands in her lap. "Buddhism appealed to me because I needed a karmic balance for all the horrible things I've seen and done. But in all the years I've been meditating, I haven't felt a tenth of the peace I felt just now. Kale was right to take you in." She was surprised at how good it felt to have Tober's approval, and then he felt like he could open up to her. Cam had been right. Tober was a good guy once you got to know him. "I've always appreciated the Buddhist philosophy of moderation," she said, trying to keep him talking. "My parents are Christians, but they were cool about letting us research and explore different religions to find the one that felt right to us." "Did you choose one?" "They all had pros and cons. None of them felt 100% right to me. But I found that they all essentially had the same core principles for being a good person. So I made up my own credo and try to live by that." "What's your credo?" "It's nothing too mind-blowing," she said, shrugging her shoulders. "I just narrowed everything down to 3 fundamental practices. The first is empathy. In order to be empathetic, you must put yourself in someone else's shoes, which teaches you compassion and kindness. The second is charity. To me, the most basic meaning of charity is the ability to love enough to give of yourself, to willingly and gladly give what you have for those in need. Then, the third is the pursuit of essential truths, the constant drive to learn more about yourself and the world around you, leading to understanding and tolerance, which brings us back around to empathy," she said, drawing a circle in the air with her finger. "So basically, my credo is, try to learn something new every day, and don't be a selfish jerk." He chuckled softly. "I like it. It's simple and to the point. Tober, I've been wondering, how come you never eat with us?" I haven't been comfortable in social settings for a while now. I'll be fine at first, but then I'll get hit with a wave of stress and anxiety. It might have to do with PTSD or something along those lines. I'm not sure exactly. She nodded in understanding. The life of a mercenary would most likely lead to a couple post-traumatic stress symptoms. And I hate small talk. I knew it, she said, pointing at him emphatically with a big smile on her face. I'm glad I'm not the only one, she mumbled to herself. He let out a small huff of laughter at her reaction. Then they heard Kale's stern voice coming from the bottom of the stairs that led up from the master's deck. Ari, come down here. He did not sound happy, so Ari got up quickly, but before she went down, she turned back to Tober. Thanks for talking with me. It was my pleasure, he said with a smile and a nod of his head. When she got down to the bottom of the stairs, Kale lifted her off her feet by grabbing both of her arms and sifted into his suite. Then he threw her into a soft armchair in the corner. He put his hands on the armrest and leaned over her menacingly. What the bloody hell were you doing up there? He said in a cold, quiet voice. Ari was shocked into silence by how mad he was at her. While she gathered her thoughts, she took in the state of the room behind him. From the rumpled bed to the clothes on the floor and the sound of someone taking a shower. Then she remembered feeling Serena's energy down here, so she assumed it was her. And then she put two and two together. Ugh, gross. Well, Kale urged agitatedly. I was just meditating. You are bloody well doing more than that, yeah? You were practically sending flares into the sky for the suits to see. What the hell were you doing to Tober? I've never seen a human's energy signature that bright before. This boat doesn't have the same kind of security as I have as Ardemir. How do you expect me to protect you when you pull shite like this? Arya exhaled a frustrated gust of air at the unfairness of it all. What she had just done was a beautiful thing. She hated the suits for taking that away from her, preventing her from sharing that peace and healing energy with people who needed it, like Adam and Tober. She understood why Kale was mad. She had just put them all in danger, so she threw out the only thing she knew would make him happy. I felt the jewel. It's down there, and I can find it today. His eyes widened a fraction in surprise. Then they heard the water in the shower turn off. Kale lifted Ari out of the chair and shoved her out the door. Go put your contacts in. After breakfast, we go down to the wreck. Then he shut the door in her face. Breakfast was the most uncomfortable meal Ari had ever had. Kale and Serena were at one end of the table trying to have the semblance of a normal conversation, and Serena was practically pulsing with embarrassment. Ari had a feeling she didn't normally have one-night stands, especially with her employer. Now she was stuck on a boat without even the possibility of a discreet walk of shame. It didn't help that Cam was sitting at the other end of the table giving Kale an unblinking stink eye, while deliberately stabbing each bite of food with his fork before shoving it into his mouth. Ari and Reed were in the middle, just trying to stay out of it. Ari had seen R-rated movies at Ainsley's house and had the talk with her mom a while ago, so she knew what was up. But now, thanks to Reed and Captain Costa's conversation at dinner, Ari had disturbing images in her mind about what might have happened between the two of them last night, which was the absolute last thing she wanted to think about. So she didn't even try to hold herself back and ate as fast as she could, barely tasting the food as she shoveled it into her mouth, mentally apologizing to Giacomo for not truly appreciating his delicious food. Not being able to stand it anymore, Reed stood up and grabbed the back of Cam's shirt, pulling him up and whispering something in his ear. While still giving Kale the stink eye, Cam wiped his mouth with his napkin and threw it down in disgust. Fine, I was done anyway. Then Reed guided him away from the table. When Ari was done, she stood up without making eye contact with anyone and did an awkward head bob curtsy thing, and then walked swiftly away down to her cabin to change into her wetsuit. When she came back up, it was only Serena on the main deck waiting for Kale to get ready, so the three of them could go over to the Mako. Ari felt bad for Serena, who looked so miserable waiting there all by herself. So she walked over with what she hoped looked like a sympathetic smile, even though she felt just as comfortable as Serena. Hey, would you mind zipping? Ugh, hold on. Hey, would you mind helping me with my zipper? I can't quite reach it. Yeah, sure, she said, jumping up eagerly, thankful Ari wasn't treating her like a pariah. Ari turned her back towards her, hoping she wouldn't notice her scar and healing room. But she needn't have worried, because Serena was too busy thinking about her own issues. She zipped up the wetsuit and then started talking. I'm sorry about the weirdness at breakfast. I'm not normally this kind of person. It's fine, don't worry about it, Ari said quickly, not wanting to get into it. Serena continued on as if Ari hadn't said anything. I just can't seem to help myself around him. He's just so hot and la 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 la. I can't hear you. Ari turned around and grabbed her by the shoulders. Serena, she said, cutting her off. It's fine. I'm not judging you. Please stop talking about it. Okay, sorry, I get it, she nodded, and Ari let go of her shoulders. But girl to girl, I don't want you to think that kind of behavior is okay. I have a little sister your age, and I'd kick her butt into next Tuesday if she did something like this. You've spent one night with the guy. Don't get all stepmothery on me now. Seriously, you don't have to worry about it. My parents raised me right, and I'm nowhere near the age to be ready for something like that, she said, wanting to run and jump off the side of the boat to get away from this conversation. Serena looked at her with pity for a second, which made Ari think Cale must have told her his story about how she and Cam had come to be his wards. But then Serena looked at her curiously. Wait, how old are you? 13. Really? She said incredulously. I could have sworn you were at least 16. You're so tall. Yeah, I've grown like 5 inches over the past couple months. I'm still trying to get used to it. Well, if archaeology doesn't pan out for you, you could always go into modeling, she said, probably thinking that Ari would like the compliment. Ready? Cale said, coming down the stairs in his wetsuit with the top part still hanging open and loose around his waist, showing off his bare chest, effectively sidetracking Serena and ending their conversation. Oh, thank God, Ari thought with a sigh of relief. He tossed Ari a face mask, which she caught easily, and walked off to the side to start adjusting it to fit her head. The first mate came out and started up the motorboat, and took them over to the Mako where all the diving equipment was. Mike was already suited up, waiting for them, and Serena purposely ignored his questioning glare as she quickly went down to her cabin to get ready. While they waited, Mike, Wes, and Cale made equipment checks and helped Ari put everything on. Then Mike gave her a mesh bag to attach to her weight belt to hold anything she found down there. Serena came back up, and while Cale helped her with the equipment, Mike went over all the procedures and hand signals just to make sure Ari had them all down, which she did. When they were all set, they went over to the side of the ship. Ari was excited and nervous, but she didn't have much time to think about it, because they were already jumping in. Wes nodded at her to go ahead. So she put the regulator in her mouth, put her hand against her mask so it wouldn't come off when she hit the water, and jumped in. Hey, get off of your sister. Annie! And Lucy, you're on watch, so watch it. The water was cool, but not uncomfortable. And when she was in, they all went under and swam towards the yellow guide rope that led down to the wreck. Everything was silent, except for the sound of them breathing through their regulators and the bubbles rapidly floating up to the surface. As she made her way down the guide rope, Ari couldn't help but take in the beauty around her. She could see the radiant glow of the schools of fish and sea creatures swimming through the turquoise blue water. Small concentrations of phytoplankton looked like tiny twinkling stars shining all around them. And as they got closer to the bottom, the coral, plants, and various bottom dwellers lit up the sandy floor like a metropolis of ocean life. She felt bad that the rest of them couldn't see how she did. Ari saw the debris trail that looked just as it did in the 3D rendering, with a grid system of strings divided up into sections, and she was brought back to the task at hand. Once they made it to the bottom, it was hard to calm down enough to connect to the Athos like she had before. Kale was looking at her expectantly, ready for her to guide them to the stone. And Micah and Serena were looking at them both like, what's the holdup? She closed her eyes to block them out and focused on her breathing, pushing out her field of awareness. Then she had it. Latching onto it, she realized it wasn't with the rest of the trail. Somehow it had either floated down differently or had been separated by centuries of currents and hurricanes, like Serena had said. She felt the pull coming from a position northwest of the debris trail. She opened her eyes and pointed with all 5 fingers. Ugh. Get a little comfort here, huh? Ugh. She opened her eyes and pointed with all 5 fingers of her flattened hand in the direction they needed to go. Kale gave her the okay sign and followed her as she started swimming. She started off following the debris trail for Mike and Serena's benefit, letting them point out different artifacts in the trail and carefully picking some up as they went. But then she swam off towards the left when she felt the pull break away from the trail. Mike tried to bring her back, but Kale caught up with him to tell him it was okay and to let her do her thing. Using the frog kick method so she wouldn't kick up the silt and obstruct their view, she swam towards the pull that became stronger and stronger the closer she came to it. They passed by crustaceans and moray eels hiding in crevices in the coral, and tranquil rays gliding above the sandy ocean floor. Then she had it. The pull was coming from underneath a coral ledge. Settle down! Then she had it. The pull was coming from underneath a coral ledge that was currently being inhabited by a humongous grouper. Ari turned to Kale and pointed to the spot. Then she swam over and tried to emanate calmness and reassurance towards the fish, trying to let him know they weren't there to hurt him. The fish must have got the gist because he swam off without incident. Then Ari got to work deliberately wafting away the sand and silt, covering the stone with her cupped hand, until enough was forced away that she could see the corner of an intricately tooled metal box peeking up from the sand. She looked back at Kale, whose eyes were round with surprise and excitement, and he encouraged her to keep going. After a few minutes of careful and deliberate wafting, she was finally able to pull the box out of the sand, and she held it up to Kale, Mike, and Serena, who looked at her like she had just performed an extremely impressive magic trick, which she guessed in a sense she just had. Kale came over and gently put his hands around it, like he was almost afraid to touch it. Then he motioned for her to put it in her mesh bag. Having found what he wanted, Kale had no interest in looking at the rest of the wreck, and motioned for them to start going back. They swam back to the guide rope and started slowly making their way back up to the surface. The time it took them to decompress on the way up must have been torture for Kale, but Ari decided to take the time to appreciate the watery world around her. Now that she had found the stone, they'd most likely leave as soon as they could in case the suits had seen her energy flare this morning. She took it all in, knowing that she probably wouldn't see something like this again in the foreseeable future. When they broke the surface, they all took out their regulators, and Mike swam over to her as they all traded water. "How the hell did you know to look over there? I was nowhere near the rest of the wreckage." Ari's eyes cut over to Kale for a second, then back to Mike. "I don't know. I've just always had a knack for finding things." Which, by all accounts, was the truth, but Mike still looked at her skeptically. Then Wes and his crew all came to the side of the boat and looked down at them expectantly. Ari got the box out of her bag and held it up over her head triumphantly, and they all broke out in cheers. When they were all back on the boat and gotten all their equipment off, Kale eagerly took the box from her and brought it over to the artifact depository under the tarp. It was sealed shut by an almost cement-like mixture of silt, mud, and rust. Mike was explaining to him that the muddle had to be desalinified first, and then they could try to open it later. But Cale promptly ignored him and broke the seal using his impressive strength, and the lid popped open. Serena let out a pained chirp at the careless way Cale was handling the historical artifact, but quickly got control of herself. The box was filled with mud and silt that had seeped in over the years. Cale stuck his hand in, winnowing through the muck, pulling out priceless gold chains and pearl necklaces like they were trash. Mike and Serena carefully gathered up everything he was pulling out, and Wes grabbed a gold chain and cleaned it off and put it around his neck like it was his due. When Cale thought he found what he was looking for, his hand stopped, and his eyes locked onto Ari's. Then he slowly pulled out of the box a muck-covered rectangle the same size as the green and blue stones she had found. He plunged it into one of the bins of salt water, and when his hand came out, he was holding a clear diamond-like jewel that sparkled with hidden colors only Cale and Ari could see. Everyone was frozen in awe, until Cale ran over and picked Ari off the deck and swung her around in a big hug of celebration. "You wonderful, amazing girl!" he exclaimed, and then put her back down. "You did it!" He grabbed her face in his hands and kissed her on the forehead. Then he turned back towards the crew and held the stone up to the sunlight, letting everyone witness its crystal-clear, sparkling brilliance. 20 years of searching for this baby has finally come to fruition. Let's celebrate! Everyone cheered, caught up in his excitement. Then Cale had Marco, the first mate, go back to the Talisman to bring back his finest bottles of champagne, which made them all even more excited. Ari just stood there in shock at the overt display of affection Cale had just shown her. He'd never hugged her before, let alone kissed her head. She knew it was just because he was excited about finding the stone, but if she was completely honest with herself, she hadn't minded. Like it or not, Cale had become a sort of father figure, however dysfunctional, and it had been nice to feel some familial affection. Then she was hit with a wave of homesickness for the Rileys. She'd give anything to be hugged by her mom and dad just one last time. Marco came back about 10 minutes later with Reed and the champagne. Marco brought the glasses, while Reed brought the bottles of champagne, and it became a party when someone turned on some music. After about 20 minutes of celebrating, Ari was hanging out at the rail, trying to stay out of the way of the rowdy adults and avoiding Mike's questioning stares. Wes made his way over to Ari with a glass of champagne for her, and avarice in his eyes. "Here you go, darling. Go ahead and have a glass. You deserve it. I was just talking with Mike, and he said that you were like some kind of human metal detector down there, honing right in on that metal box like you knew exactly where it was." Ari took the glass, having no intention of drinking from it, and scanned around for Cale or Reed so they could come save her from Wes's unwanted attention. He had already moved on to something stronger than champagne, and along with the alcohol fumes, he was putting off a major creep vibe that was starting to make her real uncomfortable. She could easily take him down if he tried something, but she'd rather not have to resort to violence against the captain of the ship. She saw that Reed was immersed in a lively conversation with some of the crew, and Cale was busy making out with Serena. Great, she thought dispiritedly. "It was just beginner's luck, I guess," she said, trying to sidestep in, but he blocked her exit and cornered her back against the ship's side rail. "According to Mike, it was more than that." He looked her up and down, his greed warring with the lust in his eyes. She intentionally blocked herself from reading his intentions, since they were already pretty clear. "I understand why Cale keeps you around. Not only are you a bona fide treasure detector, you're one of the most gorgeous girls I've ever seen," he said while his eyes left her face to stop and hover over the swell of her chest under the tight wetsuit. "Ugh, gross. That's it, Jackhole. You asked for it." But before she could make him regret ever coming on to a 13-year-old, she heard the thrumming whine of a motor coming up next to the ship. She looked over her shoulder to see Cam driving a jet ski and motioning for her to jump on the back. Not thinking twice, she threw the champagne into Wes's face, swung her legs over the rail, and landed perfectly onto the back of the jet ski behind Cam. As soon as she put her arms around his torso and held onto the front of his life jacket, He gunned the engine, and they sped away from Wes's stream of profanity and horrible names for her. Cam went as fast as he could until he felt they were far enough away from the Mako. Then he slowed down to an idle and turned around towards Ari. "So, I take it you found the stone?" he said conversationally. She laughed softly. "Yeah, Kale was pretty excited about it. Mike might be on to me, though. Apparently he was talking about my supernatural treasure-finding abilities to Wes, who thought, well, I honestly don't know what he was thinking. I mean, I do, but not what his end game was. Even if she did look older than 13 now, she was still obviously a minor, and her rich and powerful guardian had been no more than 30 feet away. You okay? I saw that skeevy old bird making moves on you, so I thought I'd plate the knight in shining armor and offer you a way out. Thanks for that, by the way. I was this close to turning him into a eunuch," she said, pinching her fingers together. "Yikes," he said, adjusting an imaginary tie around his neck. "I'm sure the world would have been better off if you had, but it probably would have been very messy. Reed and he who shall not be named should have made sure that ass hadn't been able to put you in that position." "Yeah, well," Kale had been busy at the moment. "Sorry about Serena, Cam. Everything was happening so fast I never got a chance to talk about it. Are you all right?" He shrugged his shoulders like it didn't matter to him anymore, but she could tell it still kind of did. "I'm fine. I had a talk with Reed and Tober. I'm over it. Besides, there's plenty of other chicks in the sea," he said with a grin, knowing full well he got the saying wrong. Ari laughed and went in for a hug, needing it just as much as she thought he did. He was caught off guard at first, but then he put his arms around her and hugged her back. Even though she'd always miss her family, she knew she'd be okay as long as Cam was around. Then she pulled back and playfully knocked him out of the way as she climbed in front and took control of the handles. "All right, now it's my turn." She gunned the engine and barely giving him enough time to grab a hold of her before almost falling off the back. After driving around in circles and jumping over their own wake a couple times, Ari and Cam came back to the Talisman, and Kale and Reed were already there waiting for them. The party had pretty much ended as soon as Ari made her escape, and Wes went on his drunken tirade. "What happened, lass?" Reed asked after they had gotten the jet ski and the motorboat back into the stowage. The Talisman crew was already busy preparing to get the ship underway, and Kale, who was in a sour mood now, had gone up to his suite to change. "Nothing I couldn't handle," she brushed off, a little disappointed that he and Kale hadn't been there for her. "Hey! Stop it!" "But I guess that's what they're training me for, so they don't have to be bothered to look out for me. Cam had my back," she said as she and Cam did a no-look high-five as he walked by. "Hey! You two, cut it out and share." "As soon as we heard that prick bad-mouthing you, we were on him in a second. Did he do anything to you?" he asked. "If he had, he'd be on his way to a hospital right now," she said as she walked away towards her cabin. And that was the end of Chapter 15 of Outlier by Lisa Beeson. And it's getting late. It's almost time to go to work. Pooey. Ladies, share and stop it. Oy. Maybe I'll go on to number 16, but I kind of doubt it. I feel like I've gone through a few, and I need to get ready for work. Thanks for joining. Peace.